Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Flying Against Time with Chapter 12. Ted Scott's heart was beating like a trip hammer as he worked his way toward the candle that now represented his only hope of escape. It was a slender hope. No one knew it better than the young airman, but it was all he had. If one of the gangsters should happen to step inside, Ted's last chance would disappear. Or if one of them should merely glance through the window, he would see in an instant that the captive's position had changed. Slowly and toilsomely, Ted worked his body toward the chair. He noted that the candle was only half burned down. That would give him all the fire he needed for the purpose he had in mind. No interruptions came. A low hum of conversation still persisted outside. Nearing the chair, Ted raised himself to a sitting position, taking care not to interpose himself between the candle and the window, lest a shadow be thrown. He raised his bound hands and held his bonds over the flame of the candle, straining them as wide apart as he could so that the flames might strike the center of the cords. The cords were dry and yielded readily to the heat. They did not burst into a bright flame at once, but began to smolder until strand after strand gradually gave way. The heat was torturing, and Ted could feel that his hands were blistering. But he was keyed to so high a pitch that the pain went for little. It would be easier later to find lotions for burned hands than comfort for a bruised spirit. He did not wait until the cords were entirely burnt through. He stopped when he knew a single hard jerk would break the remaining strand. When he had reached that point, he let himself down to the floor, on his back, and threw up his bound ankles so that the cords that bound them were directly over the flame. They also yielded until he knew they would be close to breaking point. Taking care not to overturn the candle that stood him in such good stead, Ted now wriggled his way back to the position he had formerly occupied and lay supine. To a casual glance it would seem apparent that he had hardly stirred, but though his body was quiet, his mind was working feverishly. Now at least he could put up a fight for his liberty. It would be a desperate and almost hopeless fight against 3 men of the character of those with whom he had to deal. How should he go about it? This was the question that puzzled him. His first impulse had been to open the door and rush upon his enemies, trusting that he might fell 1 or 2 of them in the panic and confusion that would probably follow his unlooked-for appearance. But they might be quick on recovering themselves, and he would make an excellent target, framed as he would be in the lighted doorway. On the other hand, if he extinguished the light before making his dash, that very fact would put them on their guard against his escape. No, that would not do. He discarded the idea definitely. He must try some other way. He was spared the necessity of planning further by the opening of the door. The leader of the gang entered and paused with his hand on the doorknob. "I'm pretty sure that's Jack's machine I hear coming," he said to his men. "I know the sound of his car. When he gets here, make sure that he's got plenty of gas, for we don't want to have to stop anywhere on the road. If he's a little short, take some gas from this guy's tank." "All right, Chief," came the answer. "Stand ready then to come in and help me. Carry this man out when I give the word," commanded the leader. "I want now to take a look through the place and make sure we haven't left a clue behind." He ranged through the rooms on the lower floor, making a careful inspection. When he was satisfied that everything was as he wanted it, he came back to the front room and approached the place where Ted was lying. "We'll have to be getting along now," he said. "I'll just take one more look at them cords to make sure everything's neat and tidy." He came close to Ted and stooped over to examine his bonds. With a sudden jerk, Ted snapped the cords, his hand shot out and closed on the fellow's throat. The astonished thug was yanked off his balance and fell with a thud on the floor. Like lightning, Ted swung over the top of him, his hands never relinquishing their grip, his fingers sinking deeper and deeper into the flesh. The man struggled desperately, but he was no match for the seasoned athlete that mastered him. His hands reached down to his belt as though to draw a weapon, but Ted's legs were fastened about his arm and held it tight. For a minute or 2 the combat continued, but there was never a doubt as to the issue from the moment those sinewy fingers of Ted Scott got a deadly grip on the rascal's throat. Ted could feel the fellow's body growing limp and helpless. Then the struggle ceased altogether. Ted relaxed his hold, for, as vile as the scoundrel was, he did not want to endanger his life. He rose to his feet, breathing hard. He snatched up the candle from the chair and held it close to the fellow's face. It was swollen and purple, and the tongue was hanging out, but a touch of the man's breast showed that he was still breathing. He looked about the shack and saw lying on the floor the wrench that he had brought with him when he had come to the supposed rescue of the woman decoy. Then he extinguished the candle and approached the door. Before he reached it, however, it opened and two dark figures stood in the doorway. "Why did you douse the glim, Chief?" asked who had been addressed as Bill. "We ain't quite ready." The voice stopped as Ted brought the wrench down on the man's skull. He fell senseless to the floor. His companion stepped back and felt at his belt, but Ted hurled the wrench in the fellow's face and he staggered back. Before he could regain his scattered senses, Ted had leaped over the body of the man in the doorway and was speeding towards his car. He found it where he'd left it under the shadow of the trees by the roadside. In a moment he had leapt in, started the engine, thrown in the clutch, and was whizzing in the direction of Bromville. Despite the pain from his burns and the terrible mental strain that he had undergone during the last few hours, Ted Scott's heart was singing as he sped along. He had matched his wits against those of his captors and triumphed. He had escaped at the moment that every door of escape had seemed closed against him. He chuckled at the thoughts of the discomfiture of the bandits, 3 of them hardened thugs outwitted and beaten by one man. He visualized their frantic rage as they should come to and realize what happened. Such scoundrels, however, ought not to be left at large, and Ted drove straight to the Bromville police station. "What's up, Ted?" asked the chief of police, Dugan by name, as he looked in surprise and with beginning alarm at Ted's disheveled appearance. "Plenty," replied Ted. "Can you get 2 or 3 of your men, Dugan, and come along with me? I think I can promise you something of a haul. I'll tell you about it as we go along." "Sure thing," replied Dugan, and called out 3 of his men in a hurry. They piled into Ted's car, and as it sped along towards the scene of the outrage, Ted told the main facts to Dugan. The latter was ablaze with wrath. "The scoundrels!" he ejaculated. "If we can only reach them before they make their getaway. Step on the gas, Ted, for love of Mike, step on it!" Ted stepped on it with a right good will, and in a few minutes they were abreast of the lonely house. The chief and his companions jumped down, and with drawn weapons approached the dilapidated shack. Their caution was needless. The birds had flown. The policemen surrounded the place and searched the house. There was nothing to indicate that anyone had been there, except a nearly emptied bottle of liquor, which Dugan possessed himself of at once, in hope of finding fingerprints. It was evident that the one gangster who retained his senses after Ted's devastating onslaught had succeeded in reviving his 2 companions and escaping with them. The ground was hard and dry and showed no indication of the route the thugs had taken. Probably their car had returned in time to take them away. Dugan was loud in his outcry against the ill luck that had thwarted the capture of the miscreants. "Sure'n, I'd have liked to get them fellows myself. But let's go back to the station, and I'll notify every police chief within 50 miles to be on the watch for 'em." "Nothing in that, I'm afraid," said Ted. "You see, their faces were covered by their caps and handkerchiefs. And even if you had them stopped, I couldn't identify them. I have some satisfaction anyway, in knowing that I've given them something to remember me by. I guess we'll have to let the whole affair go at that. And just one other thing, Dugan. Keep this to yourself like a good fellow, won't you? No charge will be made by me, there's no entry on your blotter, and we'll just let the matter die. My father and mother would be frightened to death if they should learn what happened to me tonight. You know Charity, and know how she'd take it. A word from you will keep your men quiet. How about it?" "I suppose I'll have to let you have your way, Ted," Dugan said reluctantly. "As long as you're making no charge, this isn't an official matter. But oh boy, if I only could land those rats!" "They'll get into the net sooner or later," prophesied Ted. "It's only a matter of time with those fellows. But here we are at the police station. Sorry to have bothered you and your men, Dugan, on this fruitless chase. Don't forget that mum's the word." "I'm hip," replied Dugan, and I'll pass the word to these club swingers of mine. But come along in and let me doctor those hands of yours. It's too late for you to go to Meredith, and when it comes to burns, I'm as good as any of those medicos." Ted gratefully availed himself of the offer, for his hands were smarting. Luckily the burns were not deep, and the application of Dugan's lotion soothed them greatly. Bidding his warm-hearted friend good night, Ted Scott made his way to the Bromville house, and stole in softly, as if to evade any questions from Eben and Charity. He had almost reached his room when a door opened, and Eben's grey head popped out. "Hello, Ted," he said in a stage whisper, so as not to disturb his wife. "Was getting rather worried about you. Thought your car might have broken down or something." "No," returned Ted in the same low tone. "Just met some fellows who were so glad to see me they couldn't let me go. Kept me till after midnight and wanted me to stay longer, but I didn't stay." "I see," said good old Eben as he prepared to shut the door. "It's mighty nice to have such warm friends." And that's the end of Chapter 12. We'll continue next week with Chapter 13, Skulking in the Bushes. Well, I guess we'll find out what that's about next week. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.